Hello everyone, and welcome to week 9 of English 121. This week we're going to continue studying poetry. We're going to be looking at words and how poets use words specifically in their poems and why that's an important part of the craft of writing poetry. We're going to have a conversation where we use the Oxford English Dictionary, which is free to all Napa Valley College students. Then you're going to reflect in your journal on allusion and how it's used in several poems. Let's begin by thinking about words and how they're building blocks for poetry. If you look back at the beginning of our chapter, there's a really interesting conversation highlighted between Edgar Degas and his friend Stephen Mallarmé. And I have a picture up there of Degas, where Degas says, "What a business, my whole day gone on a blasted sonnet without getting an inch further. And it isn't ideas I'm short of, I'm full of them. I've got too many." But then Mallarmé responds, "But Degas, you can't make a poem with ideas, you make it with words." So the idea that we're going to be talking about this week is how poems are made of words and how those words interact with one another and interact with the poetry that's been written before and the history that's come before is how to read a poem. Words possess not only their dictionary meanings, which are their denotations, right? So if you look a word up in the dictionary, there's a direct definition of what that means, or there are several different direct definitions of what that word means. But there's also so many associations and suggestions that are related to words. If you look up the word ocean in the dictionary, there's going to be a distinct description of what that means, right? We can all agree on a definition of what an ocean is, right? But your experience with the ocean, when you've gone there, if you've gone there, what it was like when you were there, what the ocean makes you think about, what you've read about the ocean, how you feel when you're at the ocean, what shows you've seen about the ocean, those will change. Those are your connotations. Those are the other things you're thinking about when you see the word ocean, besides just a salty body of water that which is not the definition, but I'm just making that up. But the idea of all of those other connotations are also present when you're thinking about the word ocean. But poems can also just be read at their face value. The poet William Carlos Williams was an amazing poet. He's considered a poet called a modernist. That means he wrote. He's an American poet. Wrote in the early part of the 20th century. And he was a doctor, but one of his poems, but he also was a really famous poet, and one of his poems is written here called "This Is Just to Say." "This is just to say" by William Carlos Williams. "I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, in which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold." A lot of times people read this poem and they think, what? That's so simple. What does it symbolize? What does it mean, right? It couldn't possibly be about, a love note between someone and his beloved, and he ate the plums that were in the refrigerator, which is what an icebox means, right? But it also could be that, right? Because there's emotion that comes across. There's a lot that's told in this very, very short, simple poem. There's what we think about when we think about the way that poets write. We think about diction, or the choice of words that they use. They can be concrete words, or they can be abstract words. So examples of abstract words are beauty, love, time, truth, sadness, happiness. These are all things that, if I say the word beauty, you have a completely different idea in your head of what beauty is than I do, because it's a very personal thing. In order to invoke beauty, you have to be very specific and describe something that you believe is beautiful with great detail. That's why someone like Ezra Pound, who is also a famous modernist, said, "Go in fear of abstractions." Because the idea is that if you write a poem, "I think she is very beautiful," then I don't really understand what she looks like. I just know that you think she's beautiful, but I have no idea how she's beautiful. Whereas if you said her hair was the color of leaves, of maple leaves changing into golden autumn hues, her eyes were deep brown and mysterious. You have to just get very detailed about what it is about this woman that's beautiful. So concrete examples, daffodils, right? That's a very specific flower, right? But you can get even more specific, by saying yellow daffodils that gaggle in the sun. You can say something like a warm hand around my waist, the map of wrinkles that spider across her squinted eyes, a white flag flapping in the wind. These give us a specific concrete image or idea that we can look at in our mind, and they're much more powerful as a poem, as an image in a poem. As William Carlos Williams says, there's no ideas but in things. So this week what we're going to be thinking about is what words mean, and their actual denotations, right? The definitions in the dictionary, and also their connotations, right? What I'd like you guys to do is to look up a bunch of words in the poems Aftermath and Mockingbird. These poems are found in our book on pages 721 and 722. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote Aftermath, and Kay Ryan wrote Mockingbird. I'm going to read Aftermath for you and Mockingbird just to begin this lesson. Aftermath. When the summer fields are mown, when the birds are fledged and flown, and the dry leaves strew the path, with the falling of the snow and the cawing of the crow, once again the fields we mow and gather in the aftermath. Not the sweet new grass with flowers in this harvesting of ours, not the upland clover bloom, but the rowan mixed with weeds, tangled tufts from marsh and meads, where the poppy drops its seeds in the silence, in the gloom. All right, so the second poem is by Kay Ryan, and Kay Ryan is well known for, whereas Longfellow is known for telling stories, narrative poetry, Kay Ryan is all about the riddle of a poem. So she's really playing with all the different connotations, denotations and connotations in these words. Mockingbird. Nothing whole is so bold, we sense. Nothing not cracked is so exact, and of a piece. He's the distempered emperor of parts, the king of patch, the master of pastiche, who so hashes other birds' laments, so minces their capriaccios, that the dazzle of dispatch displaces the originals. As though brio really does beat feeling, the way two aces beat three hearts when it's cards you're dealing. So what I'd like you to do is to close read both of these poems first. Then I'd like you to go on to, think about not only the definitions of words, but the history of a word. That's found in the etymology of a word. That's found in the beginning section of a definition in the Oxford English Dictionary. You want to know how it was used when the poem was written. So it's really important to pay attention to the fact that Longfellow's poem was published in 1873, whereas Kay Ryan's poem was published in the year 2000. You want to log into the Oxford English Dictionary, and there's a live link here. If you're on campus, you'll be able to just access it. If you're off campus, you need to use the user ID NAPAValCall and the password NAPAValCall. It's all written here. And you're going to use these to read Aftermath and Mockingbird after you've done a close reading of both the poems. Then I'd like you to answer the following questions. How does the etymology and meaning of Aftermath help explain this poem? What is the meaning of Fledged and Rowan? And I'd like you, when you look up the meaning of these words, I don't want you to just tell me what the meaning is. I want you to tell me what the meaning is and how it relates to the poem. In Mockingbird, what is the origin of the mockingbird's name? What does it tell us about the bird's song? You might want to look up what a mockingbird does, too. If you're not familiar with mockingbirds, you might want to just, Google mockingbird and look at the Wikipedia page for a second to look at, what mockingbirds do. Look up pastiche, brio, and capriccio in the dictionary. What do the musical terms add to the poem? And then what is Ryan's attitude toward the mockingbird in this poem? Alright guys, and your last exercise this week is I'd like you to think about illusions. In this chapter on words, there's a section talking about an illusion. Illusions are found throughout poetry. They're a very important part of poetry, just like using the denotations and connotations of words. Illusions connect poems to other poems, to history, to other works of art. And because an illusion is an indirect reference to a person, place, or thing, fictitious, historical, or actual. From your knowledge, supplemented by a dictionary, the Oxford English Dictionary, or other reference work, explain the illusions in the following poems found on page 723. Be sure to look up the author and think about the year the poem was published as a way to better understand the illusions found in the poem. So when you look at page 723, where these three poems are found, you'll see J.V. Cunningham has a poem called Friend. On this scaffold, Thomas More lies dead. So it will really help you if you look up who Thomas More is, and I'll give you a hint, it has something to do with Utopia. That's the work of art he made. This is the poem. It was published in 1960, but that might not help you think of the reference to Thomas More, because Thomas More is not from 1960. Think Renaissance. Friend, on this scaffold, Thomas More lies dead. Who would not cut the body from the head? So you'll notice in this poem that body is capitalized and head is capitalized. So it's asking you to think about body and head in a different way than just of the way it's relating to the scaffold. Okay? The other poem is by Samuel Menash, and this was published in 1985. It's called Bread. Thy will be done by crust and crumb, and loaves left over. The sea is swollen with the bread I throw upon the water. The third poem is by Carl Sandburg, and it is called Grass, and it was published in 1918. That's important to think about that date. Pile the bodies high at Austerlitz and Waterloo. Shovel them under and let me work. I am the grass, I cover all. And pile them high at Gettysburg, and pile them high at Ypres and Verdun. Shovel them under and let me work. 2 years, 10 years, and passengers ask the conductor, what place is this? Where are we now? I am the grass, let me work. So please think about, in all three of these poems, I want you to think about what's being alluded to, what people, places, things, what's being alluded to. Works of art, literature, religious texts. Really think about that, because this is a way that poets really bring power to their poems. Alright guys, that's it for this week. Next week you're going to be thinking about figures of speech, including images and metaphor. I'm going to introduce your next paper assignment, but it won't be due for a little while. And I will be grading your fiction papers. I'm sorry for the delay. I just had a lot of papers come in at the same time. As always, please stop by my office if you have any questions. I'd love to talk about I'd love to talk about any of these poems with you and discuss poetry with you. All right, have a great week.